So today we're going to go over our built-in blueprints that we have that we ship with Pixeldope, as well as some general blueprint setups for productions that we find incredibly useful. So this is the Level Studio, which can be downloaded from Pixeldope Cloud. If you look in our content, under Content, Baseline, Blueprints, Masters, you'll find BP Event Actor, BP Master, and we'll go over all these. Basically some blueprints as well as some enumerations, and this is an example we can set up. We'll set up today to kind of show you how it all works. The BP Event Actor is the parent class that we use in order to create blueprints underneath that parent class, which allows our BP Master to call all of them very easily. So it makes it very easy to set up. To give you an example, here we have a blueprint that I just created. We're going to open up the full blueprint editor. And you can see in here under class settings, you can see that the parent class is the BP Event Actor. So if you were going to create this, we're going to delete this right now. Sure, we can delete it or create a new blueprint. If you're creating a blueprint, instead of selecting up here Actor, you would search under All Classes, search for Event Actor, select it here, and select. And you'd name it something. Example. And we can open it up. And in the event, we can remove all these things. And what you have access to, now that it is, as you can tell under class settings, it's a parent class is a BP Event Actor, is you have the event action in, off, on, and out. So these are incredibly useful. So by using this event, as well as under class defaults, you have the ability here under default, you have an elements tab, and this directly talks to these enumerators here. And you can add an elements tab, and you can select one of these. And these, as you can tell, are there's a set number of these. And if you go under E elements, this is what sets those. So if we added a new one and we called it example and save this, and we went back to BP example and pull down, you'd see that there is a new one called example. So this allows you to have actions be triggered by specific events that are called. So now you can trigger something simple like print string. So this is event action in. So if this example action is called, it will print example in the screen. So then instead of having to create all the triggers in your actual individual blueprints, you create these triggers in your individual blueprints, and then you go into your BP Master. And in BP Master, you can use this element action. So element action. And then you can create a custom event. So we usually use the prefix PX, so it's easier to find in control panel. And we'll see custom event, and we'll say example. And then we'll trigger this off. And we'll say example and action in, because in our example we used action in. So now when this, we'll call this an editor. I'm gonna make sure to add everything to my level. So BP Master is in there, but my example is not. So add example to my level. And we're gonna hit play. We're gonna find our BP Master. And now we can see PX example. And as you can see up here in the screen here, it printed up example. So it's able to talk. The blueprint is able to talk to the other blueprint and tell it to execute specific commands, which is very useful, especially when you are exposed to blueprint timecode triggers. So blueprint timecode triggers work under the same kind of premise. There's logic inside here to make them all work, but as a user, you don't really usually need to delve into that. You can simply add a blueprint trigger to your level, and then you can tell it to run an event live, as in it'll listen for timecode, and you tell it to run an element the same way that we did in our blueprint master, but this is going to be triggering it via timecode. So example in, which will give us our example print string up there. We tell it when we want it to trigger. So for this example, we'll say 5 seconds in. We'll say 2 seconds in. And 30 frames per second. You can specifically trigger specific time level sequences to occur when this triggers, but we're not going to use that. And then we're also going to run mock timecode on play. I'm going to have it set to 0, 0, 0. So 5 seconds after we play it, we should get their print string. And we'll hit play. 1, 2, and there we go. Example. So that was triggered via timecode. And because we set up our system to be very modular and accessible via the event actor system, you can take triggers, trigger them via Blueprint Master, trigger them in the control panel, or set them up so you can have a debug trigger in the control panel, as well as say you're in production and you will need something triggered at a specific time code. That's how you do it. This other enumerator E actions are the in, out, on, off. So you don't necessarily need to adjust these at all, unless of course for some reason you want to change it different language, or you find those to be not as clear. You can change them to other values so that it's a bit clearer for you. And then we have, so this is that was our blueprint timecode trigger, and now we have virtual camera sequence with rails and with no rails. So this allows you to trigger, and it's pretty straightforward. You have a camera, you have a level sequence that you want to play, and you have a blend in time. So it allows you to blend a virtual camera via either level sequence from a tracked camera to that virtual camera on the rails. So that's we can say how much blend time we want, blend out time. Again, this lets you adjust how far, and lets you copy the track settings. This is incredibly important, especially if you have a virtual camera and you're transitioning from a track to a virtual. Obviously, you can set up the virtual camera to have whatever settings you want it to, but if you have a huge change in FOV or other camera settings, you can have issues where everything starts distorting in different ways. So it can actually look like stuff is different shape or different size than you'd want it to be otherwise. So a lot of times, one of the solutions is to make sure you check copy settings from tracked camera or from tracked. And again, you can have this trigger on a specific event. So you can have it on example. It'll cause this to go. So we know that if we hit play in 5 seconds, it'll trigger. We'll get example, and we have our transition from virtual camera to our track camera on the rails. So yeah, and that's generally how virtual camera sequence works. And by using the event system, it's very easy to kind of interact between different triggers. So if you want something to happen, if you want multiple things to happen on the same trigger, again, it's all kind of built in. So yeah, that's our built-in blueprint systems. Obviously, most of what you want to set up is going to be in here. You want to, and some of the things that we've built into Blueprint Master, we have, we can pause all sequences, resume all sequences, reset all sequences, reset all elements. So basically, it'll grab all elements that are under the event actor and trigger their off functionality. So when you set up your blueprint, your initial blueprints, you can also set up your event action off. So this will be your reset function. So instead of having to come up with logic that'll reset everything in just one blueprint, you can, in the master blueprint, you can go into each individual blueprint and decide what you want reset to do. So this action off will trigger action off on its specific call. It'll trigger action off on being called, and so you can tell it to, not display a string or, adjust in other ways. So obviously some things like particles and stuff like that, when they're triggered, and you don't necessarily have to turn them back off. But some things, if it's a constantly emitting particle, then you can tell it to stop emitting, etc., etc. So this is very useful for working cleanly and having an easy way to reset everything, because you know that as long as you set up every event action off in every blueprint that you're using, then you have the functionality to reset everything via the blueprint master without much work, individually. Yeah, and so that's our blueprint system. We also have another thing we have, of course, is under our Pixscope tab here, under modes, we have our text mesh and animated text mesh, which is incredibly useful because, who doesn't love text? Text mesh can be set up. Again, all these things are to be set up so that they're easy to use, easy to set up, and easy to deal with. So we can have an animated transition, and we can scale from 0, or see a wave scale from and to 0. So it scales in and scales out. Transition length, how long it takes to scale, and you have if you wanted to animate on idle. So we're going to type in different text. We're going to say example. As you can tell, there we go. You can even change the text direction. So if you're working in a different different language that has a right to left, then obviously you can switch that. You can use whatever font you would like, and you can tell how you want it to orient. So right now it's oriented in the center, but you can orient it on the right and on the left, as you can see here. Left, right. And that's all for easy setup. So whatever works best for you. And again, same with bottom, center, and top. You can right now it centers to bottom, but you can have center or top. And then you have the offset, which allows you to change the actual space between the letters, as we so whatever, again, depending on your font and depending on how you want your text to look, that's how you do it. And you can also adjust the triangulation on the curves, so you can get more detail around the curves. The extrusion distance, which allows it to extrude them, so it makes the text thicker, as well as the bevel size, so how much you want to bevel the edges on these. So we're going to add material so we can more easily see these things. So let's grab this floor material, and we're going to grab a chrome, and we're going to grab chrome one more time. Here we go. Actually, we're going to grab concrete for the sides. I would like to try something else. Let's try. It's kind of a cool. That's a bit. Maybe not the coolest. Here we go. So we can more easily see there's the sides, the front, and the bevel. So as you mess with the bevel size, you can have your text more or less beveled, as well as adjust the triangulation, how much detail is in the edges. So 0, here's 10, and as I change, obviously it's animating, so you can see the smoothness when it comes to the edges. And the UV scale. So if you had a UV texture on the front here, you can actually scale it so that the material is bigger or smaller. So you can get the correct look that you're going for. Dismiss. Yeah, and then obviously all this can be edited in a blueprint. So you can actually edit these directly in Blueprint. So you can send data to it. You can update it via control panel. You can update it via data tables or via Node-RED and APIs. You can pull data and update these things. So you can show time or weather, temperature, scores, etc., etc. So they're infinitely useful for setting up. We can show you a quick setup for how you would do this with a blueprint. We're going to go in here. We're going to use our example blueprint. We're going to create a new variable. We call it animated text mesh object reference. Animated text mesh variable ATM. We're going to get our animated text mesh. We are going to set it to public, and then also go from here, go to parameter, get parameters, struct, set members in the text mesh parameters, and then we're going to set the text phrase, so we have that exposed. We're going to have this event action in, trigger this, and we're going to update this to say triggered. Oh, we're actually going to update this to say example. Compile. So now on our text, we're going to go back to our text and we're going to save this example. We're going to go to our animated text mesh. We're going to set this back to default of text. And then in our blueprint example, we're going to go into here and we're going to select that text message we're using so that it knows which one to talk to. So now we'll hit play, and in 5 seconds this text should switch to example. Obviously we've moved the camera. We're going to turn that camera move off. Virtual camera move. We're going to take this. We're just going to remove this element so that it doesn't do it next time. Hit play, and overweight. We'll see the text example, and then example is triggered here. Next, we have data integration. We're going to set up a live data pooling of weather information, as well as updating the symbol based on the weather and the city name. So this is all done live. So we need 2 text meshes that we will update with the city name and the temperature. We'll name them appropriately, TM temperature and TM city name. These are, and then we'll also have to add the sun position, which will be adjusted so that it's the right time of day for each place that we grab currently. So we'll add BP sun position to our scene. So by doing all this, now we select them in our BP JSON. We select all the files that we need, the temperature, city name, and the BP sun position. After you've done that, now we can jump over to Node-RED. With this project comes a JSON file, Pixedope data integration JSON. Once you import it, this is what it'll look like. And the only thing you have to update is the IP address. So in here, you'll type in a new IP address, your specific IP address, so that when you send data, it grabs the correct place, from the correct place. Yes, so then you update these 2 values here. There you go. And once you've done that, you select deploy, and you confirm your deploy. And then you jump right back to Pixedope. So here we are. Once we've deployed it, it's ready to go. So as you can see, when I hit play, I bring up our control panel, I initialize, and then when I pull the drop down, I select a different city. It updates the name, shows the current temperature of that city, and as well as updates the sun's position so that it's correct for time of day currently.